Hi, I'm Laura.
Hi, I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
And welcome to our Lymond book club. We are finishing Pawn and Frankincense by Dorothy Dunnett with chapters 28 and 29. Philippe will lead our discussion. Any comments you guys want to share before we jump in?
It's over.
I'm still sad. That's all I have to say. I'm still sad.
I know.
I guess it was a satisfying ending based on some things that happen.
Yeah.
Kind of cliffhangery. Don't know where it's going to go next. Still a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah. Still, I'm satisfied with the ending. I think that's a good way to put it. It was a satisfying ending. I think any kind of like super victorious happy ending would have been too much of tonal whiplash. Like that would have just been not good. So I liked that it was a little bit of action and sorry, distracted by my parents' puppy. I think, it was action-y. There was a cliffhanger, which I think is very intriguing.
Well, you guys have been talking for the entire book about Onofrian. Were you satisfied with how that concluded?
I can't believe how wrong we were about him. He turned out to be a good guy after all.
No, that was good. And I thought it made sense. Like, yeah, like his sort of devotion to Gabriel from back in Malta. Like, I thought that played well and made sense why he did what he did and why he was so like subtle about things, even though I suspected him from the very beginning. I was like, why is this random person with them? But yeah, and I liked, yeah, it was good.
And the surprise, or maybe not surprise, Kiaya Hatun at the very end.
Yeah, that's kind of the cliffhanger. I'm like,
cliffhanger.
Is she also fleeing Roxolana now? Is she in trouble? Or is she just still got some unknown motives that we need to learn more about?
That is what
to be revealed in future installments, I guess.
I like that she's clearly going to be part of the story going forward, because I think she's intriguing. I still have questions that are unanswered about her. I'm glad that there seems to be an indication that we'll get to know some of those answers. So,
all right. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we dive in?
I think most of the stuff I want to say we're gonna go over it as we go through these two chapters, and then I assume we'll be spending some time at the end of it, sort of doing a whole book review, sort of unanswered questions, thoughts about this whole process and stuff like that. So,
yeah. Okay.
So shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, chapter 28, Constantinople and Thrace. So we begin right where we left off at the end of chapter 27. Philippa exits the sort of doorway that she entered 10 minutes ago in a fully different outfit. And we sort of follow her as she goes back to Gilles' house with Mikal. And they sort of escape down into the tunnels beneath in the boat. There's an extra raft now, so 9 people don't have to fit in one boat. Very interesting at this point, before I finish the chapter, that Onofrian is not around. He's not one of the 9 people. To be revealed very shortly why. There's a bit where Gautier gets all hussy about his treasure and wants to take it with them. But while they're down in the tunnels and they meet up with Herpestes, the mongoose, 2 men try and intercept them, and then a whole bunch of men try and stop them. One of them shoots and kills Gautier, and that man is Onofrian Ziswitz. Not necessarily sure if he's the one that shot the arrow, but his men did. So obviously, as we've been figuring for a while, Onofrian has been a spy for Gabriel this whole time. There's a bit of trickery that happens with darkness and fire and sort of melting the snow that is being stored. So there's like a flood of water that comes out, and Lymond is able to sneak back around and stab Nofrion. Again, darn, I'm so sad about that. Then they all escape to the Dauphiné. Nicole ends up leaving. What?
They don't escape to the Dauphiné.
Do they not get on the Dauphiné?
It's a distraction that is being guarded by Roxolana. So.
Right. So they don't escape to the Dauphiné. I missed that part. McCall ends up leaving them. Pierre Gilles ends up leaving them at some point. They're trying to outrun Roxolana. There's a point while they're escaping that they sort of split up, and a group of men find Philippa, Marta, and Kuzum. And then, of course, one of these men holds Kuzum hostage. And I was like, don't you effing dare kill the other child. I will throw this book in a fire. It doesn't happen, fortunately. Lymond kills this guy. But we find out that Lymond is now blind, and he's really, really stretched to his limits. So then at the very end of this chapter, they sort of split into two groups. Archie, Philippa, and Kuzum are headed on their way to Volos to go back to home. And Jarrett, Marta, and Lymond are going to stay in Volos to help Lymond through his withdrawal and to help him get better. It's a very quick and bloody sort of walkthrough of what happened in this chapter.
Sorry about the puppy barking.
It's okay.
Just ignore it, everyone.
I guess I'll jump in with an initial thought, which is just at the first page, as Philippa is leaving Constantinople or Istanbul, and as she's kind of going through the city for the last time, we have this kind of like final thoughts on the Ottoman Empire at this time. And we have the reference to Roxolana's remaining sons and how one of them is already failing and the other two are going to battle it out over what Suleiman has built. So this, and then she has this thought, perhaps she had seen Ottoman power at its height at this moment. And I think it's a little bit of the author speaking, but maybe it makes sense that Philippa would perceive this, because I think this was like the height of greatest Ottoman power. Because I definitely remember reading that after Suleiman dies, his sons fight it out, and the empire's not as strong because they're fighting internally.
Which kind of implies, right, with that whole thing about how one son liked Mustafa, so he faded, and
yeah, so there's this like, I feel like there's this sense of lost promise in the death of Mustafa, who had been a strong and good heir to Suleiman, and without him, like the empire itself, is never as strong as it was. And of course that parallels with Lymond and the death of Khaireddin.
Yeah.
I made a note in this section that all of the training that Philippa has had while she's been in the Seraglio really comes to a fruition and helps here, because it helps her blend into the city. So like if anybody was trying to follow her throughout this, like the fact that she so easily blends into like what is daily Istanbul life here is really sort of an aid to their escape.
Yeah. I mean, really keeping her head down and trying not to lose McCall in the crowd and all that, but yeah.
Although someone gets followed, I mean, it could have been any of them, because the house is being watched.
Yeah, but I mean, there was, several different trips from people from the embassy, because that's where they started, right? They all started at the embassy. Yeah, there were, I think every single person made their own way there at some point throughout the day.
Yeah, I really love that the whole underground cistern thing came up again. I thought that was great, because it's such an incredible set piece, like setting, and just that it showed up. It wasn't just that one little tiny adventure. It was part of this epic, and I really liked it. And the snow thing. Like it was kind of like this throwaway comment. And I love the way that Dunnett does this over and over, where there'll be a scene and the scene is, you know, incredibly descriptive, and there's some piece of description that really sticks in your mind because it's interesting. And then it turns out that that was, you know, dropped in there because it's going to be important later. And so I love the way she does that.
Yeah, I think it would have been too much of a just like tourist sites of Istanbul if it hadn't all come back later and paid off in this big, you know, climactic escape sequence at the end.
Mhm.
Good. Also, this is the reason, I mean, this is the Dunnett created reason why those artifacts aren't around anymore, right? Because when we asked earlier, we were like, where's this stuff? And it's like, oh, it got buried.
Oh.
One day when they're building another subway, they'll find it. So she also, I think, in terms of stuff she set up, she's kind of set up throughout the book that Gautier is this very shallow, selfish person who thinks he's the wisest and most, you know, refined among them, and he's really just a terrible person. And then that all comes to fruition here as well, where all he cares about is the treasure, to the detriment of his own life. Like he really thinks that he can just run in and be like, I'm not with them, it's my treasure, and like that he'll live. You know, he's an idiot. He's a very selfish idiot.
I love that he's just kind of like that. His stupidity and selfishness are what ultimately kill him. You know, that it's just like, I'm not with them, thunk, you know, and he just gets shot with an arrow.
And the fact that he survived the chess game and then he just runs to his death like that. What an idiot.
It's sort of telling that none of the characters are very bothered by this. Like not even Philippa. It's like, oh well.
Yeah. Too bad for him.
Yeah. So there's a good line also that I like, which is as they enter the underground cistern, it says, but to Philippa, holding Kuzum still at her side, it was like the last mysterious station, dark, enchanted, and cruel of some terrible odyssey, which is kind of a great summary of the entire book, actually. And it's both of its dark, enchanted, and cruel tone and the fact that it's kind of following the path of the Odyssey.
Yeah, I would be, you've mentioned this a couple times, but I'm super curious to see like a timeline of the Odyssey and a timeline of this book, or you know, a map. I want to see like the Indiana Jones red line map of the Odyssey and this book and see what, I'm just curious how they line up and all that.
I would bet that it's in some like Whispering Gallery, the publication from some year, but I don't know where to even start to find it. And they won't mail me anything because they're not shipping to the US. I was trying to get all the back orders of Whispering Gallery before we did this. But yeah, I'm sure there's stuff out there that researches that, and yeah,
because you just have a feeling that like she's definitely making all these Odyssey references on purpose, and like those aren't throwaway comments. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, she definitely took inspiration. I think what a cool way to live your life. Like she's like, I'm gonna go travel to a bunch of places from the Odyssey and go there and see the lay of the land and then write a book about it, and she did.
Yeah, I love the little line where they're running out of time, and so they sort of have to treat Kazum harshly. Like they can't wait for him to be kind of coaxed into all this. And so it says, when Kazum stood suddenly still, frenzied rejection on his white, dirty face, which is like, oh, poor little kid. And then just a couple of paragraphs later, they're talking about the order of everyone going, and it says, last of all, Lymond picked his way, bearing Kazum, the little boy's face in his shoulder. And you can just see like him sort of tucking this kid into his shoulder. And you're like, oh.
It's a great kind of like almost like ironic payoff, because all you wanted is for Lymond to rescue his child, and you have this image of Lymond rescuing a child, but like it doesn't quite feel right.
Heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking.
No, but at least he's not holding the fact that it's Gabriel's child against Kazum, you know?
No, I mean, yeah, of course. Like it's,
I think a weaker person would.
that moment where we're in his point of view way before he meets the two kids, where he's thinking about how both children have an equal right to live, is just extremely telling about Lymond and about his ability to be like compassionate and fair in his thinking.
And he genuinely doesn't seem to be holding this little boy, like he doesn't seem to have a resentful attitude toward this kid at all. It's really...
But I think it's also really telling that he's not like, I can't leave this child behind, I must protect the child. He definitely isn't acting like he thinks it's his, that he doesn't think it's the child he made the vow to. Because if it was, he would keep the vow and stay with him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Sad.
We also have a very typical Lymond moment where Philippa is complaining that she wasn't told about the escape. And Jared actually says he didn't like doing it, meaning, I guess, tricking her. But Lymond always kind of unilaterally makes these decisions, doesn't tell people.
Yeah. I also like when Jarrett says, you weren't present at the interview between Marta and Francis this morning. He called her one of nature's bloody little hermaphrodites. Then he told her she was a mercenary bitch and could pay for it. And you're like, first of all, ouch. Like, that's kind of harsh. And second of all, I thought it was interesting that he calls her a hermaphrodite, because I think it implies that he sees Marta as having like masculine and feminine qualities in equal measure, which I don't think is wrong. Like her, in terms of their culture, like the way that she functions within their culture, she definitely, negotiates and goes off on her own and sort of doesn't play a feminine role in how she functions. And I really like that about her. I don't think I would have called her a hermaphrodite about it, but I do think that that's Lymond acknowledging like actually her strengths in that way. So I don't know. Although he's insulting her at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, so I think, how do I say? He's obviously struggling with the death of the child, the opium addiction, the stress of everyone's life being in his hands. So kind of throughout this whole sequence, he's pretty much like a giant dick to everybody. But in a very, like, his actions are for the good and their protection and all that stuff. And I think he's particularly nasty to Marta, and he doesn't seem to have seen the way she's kind of changed. And it's not until the next chapter where he really understands that. So I think he's intentionally just being horrible to her and not realizing what's going on. And there's even the exchange right after that where Philippa says she doesn't hate him. Last night she wanted to help. And Jared's like, well, I'm damn sure she won't want to help now, but she actually does. She gives up the treasure to save him.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Marta is insightful about Lymond in these chapters in ways that Lymond is usually insightful about other people, but is failing to be because of extenuating circumstances, which we all know.
Well, and particularly he's failing to be insightful about Marta because he's just trying to block her existence from his brain and not think about her.
Yeah.
I also like the comment that Jarrett makes about how Gautier is arguing, like, I'm not with you, like, why do I have to suffer for this? And he says the only way to be sure is to stay behind and see whether they kill you or not.
And the do.
Of course, like, if you're Roxolana, you're just going to be like, kill everyone in that party. They know that I betrayed Suleiman, like, they all going to die. End of story. I don't care that guy says he's not with the others.
Okay.
It's like,
how is that at all convincing to someone who's trying to cover her ass? Like, no. Yeah.
And I think it's also telling that in the sequence where, they're escaping through the tunnel and they hear that they're being followed, Lymond goes off to create a distraction And Jarrett, after a moment, goes after him and helps him. And of course, Lyman's like, no, like, don't help me. And Jarrett insists on doing so. And it's very like, it goes back, I think, to that scene in the beginning where Lyman says, don't let me drive you away. And Jarrett seems to have taken it to heart. And even when Lyman's like, go away, he's like, no, I'm going to stay and help. And he does it again when Lyman's going through withdrawal. He's like, I'm not leaving, I'm staying and helping.
Yeah. And even when in the withdrawal, I mean, we'll talk about when we get there, but even when Jarrett is clearly like deeply frustrated with Lyman, he still doesn't leave, which good for him.
He sticks it out to the end.
Yeah.
Until he has no choice because Lyman sneaks away again.
There was go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go.
Well, there was a bit I liked also. It's just a very Lymond moment where Lymond is distracting Onofria, and it says, Lymond's voice, coolly interested, told nothing of the speed with which, turning the assorted friends round, he was in the process of dispatching them to safety. And it's just this, even in the midst of all this super duper stress, the way that Lymond uses his voice as this, coolly interested, like this acting to disguise what's really going on, which I think is just part of what makes him such an appealing character, that he can present this facade to the world of being calm and dispassionate and cool when actually underneath he's anything but.
Yeah. I mean, you can see the image of him like frantically moving everyone around with his body, and yet his voice is just completely smooth, completely calm. And yeah.
And it's part of what makes the like outsider point of view so much fun. Every time you get an outsider point of view and someone's like, he's so cold, and that's not what's really going on. And in the first book, that is the mystery of like what's underneath. And it's just fun. I think it's part of what makes him such a compelling character.
Yeah. I enjoyed. And I thought it was interesting too that this. He's talking when Lyman's talking to Onofrian about Gabriel, which just another sign. Like Onofrian's relationship with Gabriel is just another like how manipulative and mastermind, playing three-dimensional chess, whatever that Gabriel does. But Lyman says he's talking about Gabriel's death, and he says the mutes were good at it too, meaning the people who actually killed Gabriel. And then he made himself unpopular, with Roxolana. Even without me, she couldn't afford to let him survive. And I think that's absolutely true. I think we mentioned it last week, but just like Gabriel wasn't walking out of there. Like there was no way. So, yeah.
Yeah, even had he won the chess game and killed all of them, he would have been next in line.
Yeah, she still would have.
Mm-hmm. He had gotten to the level of power that he was going to reach in the Ottoman Empire. There was no way that he was going to get up that next rung. So.
Well, and it's also, it's very similar to Gautier, like pushing it and pushing it. Like Gabriel had gotten into a position of immense power where he could have risen, but he had to go messing with Roxolana and messing with Suleiman and helping get the kid killed, and like intriguing in a way. Like his arrogance is what brought him down in the end.
Yeah. Because why did he, like an interesting question is like, why did he care? Because if he's this number 3 person in the Ottoman Empire and
he wants to be number 1.
Number 1, right? But it's kind of like, crazy.
I suppose his goal would have been to get one of Roxolana's kids as the Sultan in a way where he had complete control over that person, and then he would effectively, get Suleiman out of the way, get Roxolana out of the way, and be the power behind the entire Ottoman Empire. Like he just can't stop.
Right.
And he's a sadist, so he just can't stop doing these schemes, not only to get power but to hurt.
Yeah, and his hubris is what brings him down, and pride goeth before fall.
Yep.
What a delicious fall it was.
It was.
But of course. Oh wait, no, never mind. That's a different angel. I was gonna say like Gabriel, he fell, but I was thinking of Lucifer. No. Wrong guy. Sorry.
I mean, Gabriel in a certain sense is Lucifer. Like I think the comparison is better with Lucifer obviously than Gabriel, because Lucifer is, you know, the most beautiful of the angels and falls because of pride and all of that. So
Well, it's like this man is pretending to be Gabriel, but if he's really Lucifer, and she definitely uses like devil imagery with him at times.
Yeah.
oh sure, yeah.
Um,
Nobody's going to be named Lucifer in the 15th century. That would just not happen.
I thought on 580, Philippe, you would enjoy the sort of, there's like this recap of what had been happening, and like, you know, Onofrian explains the accidents, and then there's a reference of the revenge that Onofrian had already taken even before Gabriel died, which was the opium, so the indication that he'd been poisoning Lymond even before Gabriel died at Zuara. And then the reveal that that's why Salablanca died.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice little like parlor room scene where the villain reveals himself and is like, this is what's been happening the whole time. But I think we sort of intuited all of that already. So
Yeah, I was really impressed when you guys like figured all that out.
I mean, kudos to Dee for that one, because Onofrian didn't phase me at all. It was when Salablanca died that I was like, this seems way too pat for Onofrian. Like that's when I started getting very suspicious. So
And I think I had a moment in the midst of that where I was like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I think I've come to the point with Dunnett's books where I'm just so suspicious of like random people. Like if anybody, so like for instance, if anybody shows up in the next book and it's not like Philippa or Lymond or Jarrett or Richard, it's like some random person, I'm gonna be like so suspicious of them. Just yeah.
and I think, you know, we were all both actually suspicious of the person that set up to be the suspicious one, McCall, who, even though meddlesome as hell, and because of him, some pretty awful things happened, he still ends up being on sort of the right side of the heroes, the protagonists of this book.
Like, I still would say McCall's kind of shady. Like,
oh yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Like he's shady, but in a way that benefits them and seems to be on their side.
Mm-hmm.
But I also get the sense about McCall that like his ultimate loyalty is not with them. So he's on their side for the moment.
Yeah.
It's just like saying Gazelle is super shady. Oh, there she is. Everyone say hi. It's just like saying Gazelle is super shady, because she is sort of helping them out, but she's definitely doing it for her own purposes, which we're not 100% sure of yet. So
Yeah, I completely agree.
I mean, I think obviously Mikal is doing Gazelle's bidding, and it so happens that her bidding is to help them escape. But if her bidding was to get them killed, he would do that too, probably.
Yeah. That's exactly the vibe that I get from him. Where it's like he's helping, but he's not helping because he has some sort of like loyalty to them in some way. Although he does seem to have like an affection for them in some way, but I think that's not strong enough to go against his loyalty to Gazelle.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that he brings the children back speaks for itself. Like that tells us what we need to know about him.
Yeah, and I hope he shows up later. Like the fact that we've got Gazelle at the end of this book, I really hope McCall. He's interesting, you know, as a character. He got more interesting at the very beginning. I was like, okay, this guy's kind of boring, but he got very interesting later on. So
I really love him. Like I feel like he adds so much character. Like the fact that she uses his character to bring in all of this Persian love poetry, and to get Philippa this, you know, large array of Persian love poetry that she's going to know for the rest of her life, and just like the fact that he's like, it's just such an interesting kind of cultural like subculture, these like rich kids who travel around telling, you know, stories, and the way that they seem definitely like 16th century hippies, like it's just fascinating. It's so colorful.
kind of violent hippies, like they're sort of hippies, but they kind of leave out the peace part. It's like they're all about love and then kind of shady violence at the same time. So, yeah. I love the fact that Lymond really needled Anafrian with telling him that his food was bad.
I was going to point that out.
Yeah.
Hurt in his tenderest spot.
Hurt in his tenderest spot. And I love that it wasn't like insulting Gabriel, because you'd think that would be the tenderest spot, right? To say like, Gabriel sucked, well, whatever. But instead, it's like, your dish was terrible. I never liked it.
I think that's part of why, like, I when the first time I read it, I don't think I was suspicious of Anafrian, because it was so cute how he's so like into his recipes and his food and the beautiful clothes, and he cares so much about it. And that's not fake. That's genuine. He really cares about the food.
Yeah.
And it's just funny. It's like a cute, funny trait, except he's actually bad.
Yeah. He's obsessed with clothes and recipes and revenge.
And in a way, it's like he's another victim of Gabriel. He's been manipulated, but nobody's got any sympathy because he really hurt them.
Absolutely.
I always thought your urchins in ginger were bloody appalling, which, I mean, that sounds pretty appalling, to be honest.
Yeah.
Did he give you the recipe?
Because he says Gabriel taught him. It was Graham Mallet who trained me. And Lymond says, did he give you the recipe? Like, did he train you in cooking?
Terrible dish.
Oh, I just imagine like Gabriel teaching Anafrian how to cook. He trained him in fighting, not in cooking.
Probably poisons and all of that.
But remember, Anafrian is a really good fighter, so I guess he did learn the fighting from Gabriel. So then
But he's never really shown it. Like, the only time he showed it was when he was doing his play farce to like pretend that, oh, I tried my best to save Salablanca, and like he kills the assassin that was after Lymond. Because what we see here in this section is him just shooting people with arrows from the distance. So sort of a smarter way to sort of take out your foes, but also a little more cowardly.
He fights in the very first scene he's in the bathhouse, right? I think that's where he like proves himself, and Lymond's like, okay, I'll take you with me because you can fight and cook.
Sure.
Yeah.
He showed that when he needed to get in Lymond's good graces.
Exactly.
Okay, now I'm thinking back to the bathhouse. I've completely forgotten that fight. What was the motivating factor for that fight? Was it actually set up for Anafrian to look good in front of Lymond, so Lymond would take him on the trip? Or was there like what was the deal with that fight? I can't remember.
It was partly that, and it was also one of Gabriel's first sort of entrapments, so that the two nuns were there to sort of lead Lymond to Algiers, where there was a trap waiting for it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, that in itself was a trap, because that's when he hooked up with Anafrian, and Anafrian followed him since. So clever, wily Gabriel. Ugh.
Yeah, because I just remembered Anafrian joining them on the road. I didn't remember him being back at the bathhouse, but yeah.
Yeah, they met him at the bathhouse.
Yeah, so that would make sense if it's like all that stuff is just doing multiple things.
Exactly. And you've got the red herring of the nuns and Algiers to distract you from the infiltration.
Yeah, and the fact that there was a fourth person there on Gabriel's side that was there to kill the nuns. So it all made it look like Anafrian was peachy clean in this business. So, and yes, I used peach for purpose.
What do you think about Marta's decision to give up the treasure in order to save the group?
It's like she's so great in these last two chapters. Like just from the moment where Pierre Giles says it's best, it was the girl Marta's idea, and like from that point on to the end of the book, you're just like, oh, Marta, good job. She's just a good character. And
I really love her because she's never sentimental, but she's there and does what needs to be done.
Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, because like this scene, I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but in the next chapter when she's helping Lymond, like she doesn't pity him in that, because you know that would just, he would hate that. And she's very just matter of fact about helping him through this addiction. And I think it's the tone that she strikes with him. Like, there could not be a better tone to strike with him in this moment, where it's just matter of fact, getting things done, no pity, no sentimentality. And yet she's super loyal through the whole thing.
So I wanted to ask you guys about Mikhal's parting words. They have this exchange about all of the extraordinary range of erotic Persian poetry that Mikhal has taught Philippa. And he asks what else Mikhal taught her. And Mikhal says, happiness. She has the key. She will open the door in due time herself. And those are his parting words. Why?
I underlined it, but yeah, I wanted to talk about that too. Like, what is it that, so the implication is that Mikhail has taught her about happiness, or where her happiness is. So is it bound up in this, his ideas about love that he's taught her? Is it, in self-reliance? Like, and is it Lymond? Is her happiness wrapped up in Lymond? Which I hope not, because I think she's a stronger character than that. But yeah.
I think there might be some happiness with Lymond in the future, but I don't think that's where she is or where she even thinks that is heading at the moment. So
yeah, I agree. And I like that she will open the door in due time herself. So like, whatever it is, she's the one who will pursue it, look for it, find it, etc. And it's an interesting matchup with the comment that she makes about Lymond being a masterpiece that she wants to study and isn't able, like, she hasn't, okay, wait, I underlined that too, obviously. So I think they go well together. So it's okay, so it was more, leaving him was more like losing an unfinished manuscript, beautiful, absorbing, and difficult, which she had long wanted to read. So I think those two comments together are interesting.
I think part of it is just like you said, Dee, the sort of self-reliance that he's helped her to find, and that she also found sort of in the Seraglio. Because let's face it, she's going to have a really tough time when she gets back to Scotland, or England, actually. Flaw Valleys is in England. Like, adjusting back to that kind of life and the things that were expected of her, now that she knows all of these other things that Kate never taught her. Now, whether she was old enough not to sort of get these lessons about life yet, I don't know, but like, she didn't learn them from her mother. And I'm sure the stuff that she learned on her travels is not what she would have learned by staying in the life that was expected for her in England as well. And of course, I'm not saying that Kate is a bad mother. I think she's a wonderful mother, but she's got this position in traditional English, in the 1550s, of what a woman is and what she's there to do.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the interesting thing is that Kate wasn't even raising Philippa to fit into the 15th century view of what a woman should be. Like, she was not raising Philippa to be like a subservient wife and mother kind of character, because she wasn't that. And like, I love all the images of their relationship about like how dirty Philippa was, and like how they went and like eat in the garden and then sit under a tree, and just this hints that Kate is not raising Philippa to fit into the feminine role of England's society.
Mhm.
Now she's learned all this, embodying a feminine role from a completely alien society to the one she's going back to. So now not only does she not know the one that she's was sort of like raised in, now she's going to embody this completely different one. And she's married to Lymond, who's her mother kind of likes. Like, that's going to be a thing, I feel like.
Well, and I mean, we can go on with the speculation, but England and Scotland don't get on that well a lot of the time. And so she's an English woman married to a Scottish man, and he's like a notorious outlaw whose name was recently cleared. Like, it was a short-term solution, but there's some problems here.
Yeah. Never mind, that's way later. Never mind.
But I think, as a short-term solution, it works, because if she had gone back unwed and people found out she was in the harem of Sultan Suleiman.
Oh, yeah. No. This was like, this had to happen. It's just gonna cause problems, which I think are gonna be interesting problems. Like, I'm looking forward. I really hope that we get to see Philippa function in her society with the experience and knowledge that she has. Like, I hope we see that play out. And
I would think if that's not in the next 2 books, that it's an incredible opportunity lost.
Yeah.
And I don't think Dorothy Dunnett would have that happen. So I'm almost sure we'll get that.
Although I really, really hope that we don't have another, hey, your parent died off screen situation, because that was a bummer, like having her dad just have passed away and we didn't get to see any more of him. So I'm assuming that that's not going to happen to Kate, but because that would suck if she goes home and like.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know what's happened in Scotland and England while we've been away in the Ottoman Empire, but hopefully everything's fine.
Maybe the English attacked and like just took over everything. And I mean,
what year are we in now? Has anybody kept track of that? Laura, you might know.
I picked it up, but I don't know offhand. We're in the early 1550s. Like
1554, 1555, maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough of English Scottish history to tell you exactly what happened during those years anyway. But I know that the last time we left the English-Scottish relations, how it was kind of getting better. I know that's not going to last. So.
Yeah. I mean, it gets super bad in the 1700s, right? Like, I've got to look at a timeline. I keep not looking at timelines of British and Scottish history because I don't want to spoil things that are coming up. But I really need to look at a timeline.
Well, it gets bad when Mary Queen of Scots comes back to Scotland, which, I mean, she's probably still a child bride in France at the moment, but it's gotta be soon.
Right. Has she married the Dauphin in the books yet? Has that happened yet?
Nope.
I mean, he's gonna die young.
Yep.
I have vague memories of this.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, it's very possible that'll happen within these books if we sort of go back, because we haven't really noticed or mentioned the Dowager Queen or Mary Queen of Scots since book 2. So.
And we still have like the company, like the St. Mary's company is still wandering around France, I think, maybe. Is that where they are? Are they wandering around France?
I think it was France.
Who's in charge of them?
Was supposed to be Jarrett, but then he was like, nah.
He's not there.
Who was next in line after Jarrett?
Guthrie, Alec Guthrie, Adam Blacklock. What are some of the other names?
I like Adam.
Was there a Bell?
Well, Randy Bell was evil. He died.
Yeah,
oh, okay, yeah. Randy Bell was evil. All right.
Or he got arrested. He was evil.
Who knows? We have gotten off track. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say,
talk about that later.
In terms of like Philippa's problem she's gonna have when she rejoins society, I think Lymond was just thinking, well, I'm gonna die, so she'll be fine. Like her name will be clear.
Right.
He wasn't thinking about what would happen if he didn't die.
Dies, she's actually in a fantastic spot if he dies, because she's a widow.
Yeah, got all them. Yeah,
like that's the best position, other than the sadness. It's the best position for a woman to be in terms of power. Is she has money and she's a widow.
Well, they don't know how much money she has yet, if that happens.
But you have her own. I mean, Kate has her own.
True.
So, yeah.
So we were on Mikhal's goodbye, and I was just going to highlight the line after because it made me crack up. Pierre Gilles' farewell was less scented but equally firm.
Oh, Pierre Gilles. I like that guy.
Also just super, super cracks me up that he's still trying very hard to get Jarrett to go with him and be his note taker.
just like, he's so in love with Jarrett's secretary qualities. So great.
So funny because like it's not something you'd think Jarrett would be good at, but it's a surprise skill that he has.
You know, everyone's got hidden talents.
Excellent medical Latin, which sort of makes sense. The knights hospitalers are medical knights.
No, it does actually make sense. And I love that he's like, has personal assistant qualities.
Well, he does take orders well, and he
also
do.
He's good at following directions, and he's got all this medical knowledge and Latin, and he's perfect.
Yep.
I also love that Pierre is like, watch that woman, she'll eat you alive. And then Jarrett's like, why don't you take her? And then he says, she has too many ideas. Women with ideas are a threat to the civilized world. Which I love that comment. Get in mongoose. Ikemon? I don't know how to say it. Ikemon instead. They only have one idea. It's the same one, but they're more open natured about it. It's like, oh wow, okay. But
historically accurate 16th century sexism.
But I kind of like the women with ideas are a threat to the civilized world. It's just like, you know, what's that line about something about well-behaved women never change history or something like that. Like, I feel like it's a sexist comment that Pierre's making, but Dunnett is making a great comment about women.
Ideas are a threat to the patriarchy, so.
Exactly. It's like, how do you define the civilized world?
Yeah. So also then as they're escaping, Jarrett and Lymond are kind of fighting the whole time because Jarrett is like, why are we going so fast? They're not going to follow us. And Lymond's like, yes, they are. We have to go really fast. And it turns out, of course, Lymond is right. And Jarrett apologizes, which also I like. He apologizes a lot in this book.
Yeah.
And it's he's like, he's still Jarrett, but he's like learning.
Yeah. Yeah. He's hot-headed and he makes wrong choices and he's not very observant. But when he's wrong, he admits it, which good for him.
Oh, I see what I got wrong here. On 583, sorry, this is just a very small thing. It says they left the Dauphiné where Roxlana was guarding her. I think I read it, they left on the Dauphiné. So I just added a word in my head. Oops.
Yeah.
So I think also talking about Marta and how she's grown and changed and how we see it in the story is the way that Jarrett comes rushing back to the house under attack and sees Lymond and Marta fighting together, and Marta's wielding a sword. And like, you know, she's not Wonder Woman, but she's holding her own and, you know, holding them off long enough for everyone to end up surviving the scene. And I think it's just another, like, it goes with the hermaphrodite comment, like she doesn't hold to the restrictions of her social, like, gender role, but also she's kind of badass and awesome. And I love her.
I also think that she's not unrealistically badass. Like, you know, she's not perfect at things. She makes mistakes, and her fighting, like in this scene, her fighting skills aren't described. Like you said, she's not Wonder Woman, but she's got enough. My grandmother would say gumption. Like she's got enough like get up and go that she just is like, you know, she gets in it and does her best. And I really like that about her. Yeah.
And so then we have this scene where the one of the guys grabs Kazum and tries to escape with him. And they manage to get him back, but knowing that this guy's escape would bring a whole pack down on them, like they have to stop him. And so Lymond goes after him. And we see how physically damaged Lymond is, because we have all these descriptions of things that we would never hear about Lymond. His jump is misjudged, it's short, he loses the knife, he ends up having to like roll off the horse with the guy. And then this sequence that always sticks in my mind where he beats the guy to death with a rock and Jarrett comes barging over like horrified and angry at Lymond. And then the reveal that Lymond is blind, and the reason why he beat the guy to death so bloody is because he couldn't see what he was doing, so he just had to keep hitting him until you know, and like until he, like, hopefully he was dead, right? And it's just very telling that this line, Jarrett's hands opened. And she doesn't tell us that he had clenched his fists, but she tells us when they relax. And just we see like how he lets go of his rage and realizes, as is very typical of Jarrett, that what was happening was completely not what he thought was happening in his like initial emotional reaction.
Yeah, and then this heartbreaking line from Lymond where it says, "You damn fool," said Archie under his breath, and Francis Crawford smiled and half opened his eyes, "But I got you quite far." You know, and just that he's kind of like, "I got you as far as I could." You know, like he gave every little bit of himself that he could possibly give to get them away. And then Archie.
And the realization that this whole time that he's been fighting with Jarrett, he's just been trying to push himself a little bit further to get them safe.
And then I love that Archie was able to say, "You made it. Like we're gonna be okay."
Yeah.
Also really telling is he's blind. Archie, being Archie and being so observant, picks up on it when Jarrett's oblivious. It happened after the chess. So if you go back and read the sequence where Marta helps him after the chess game, it is apparent that he's blind, actually. He reaches out blindly for her hand, which I didn't realize at the time, the first time I read it. But then when I read this, I was like, oh.
I didn't pick up on that at all.
And then the fact that he tells Archie that there's pain, which is like not very Lymond to admit, so it must be really bad. The whole thing just,
So he's been blind this whole time? I mean, since the chess game?
No.
No, it's just something that happens when he's going through withdrawal.
And under like extreme stress.
Okay.
Yeah, when I read that line about him reaching blindly for his hand, I totally thought that was an emotional line. That like he just blindly reached for her hand, you know, because of the emotional stress, and yet that it was actually a literal line.
Yeah, but the fact that it's happened twice, that he's lost his sight due to stress, and actually if you look back, it does happen occasionally under extreme stressful circumstances. I think as far back as Queen's play, when he's injured in the closet with the Dame de Dutances, and he's under so much stress that he loses his senses, and for a moment he's blind.
Wow.
That's when she reads his mind.
I wonder if something's going on with like his optic nerve or something. Like if there's some sort of, oh.
Interesting. Something I have not picked up on at all.
Oh.
I thought it was just a side effect of the opium withdrawal.
Yeah.
Something I'll have to look forward to in the next two books. Although hopefully he won't be in as many life-threatening situations.
Oh my gosh.
I think you're reading.
I know, right?
We already talked a bit about Philippa's goodbye, but there was also this line that really stood out to me about the marriage, where she thinks about how its lack of grace concealed a true grace she was only beginning now to discern.
I mean, I love that line. And it just that there's also the line about like she's only beginning now to discern this thing about her marriage, but her husband is now separated from her indefinitely. So like this discernment that she's now beginning to have, what, you know, where is it going to go, you know, and all of that.
So I remember the first time I read this book being so pissed because what I wanted was all like the emotional consequences of what just happened. Like I wanted Lymond to go back to Scotland. I wanted to see how Kate is going to deal with Philippa and how Sibylla is going to deal with Lymond and how Lymond and Philippa are going to deal with being married. I just wanted to see all of that. So when he goes off with Guzelle, I was just like, what? No.
Same. But I'm still hoping we'll get that. I'm hoping that this is like, he's not going to end his story with Gazelle. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So
we're going to have to face some of the payoff of all this stuff that we
It might just be a book away. We might not get it till book 6. So
also, there's got to be payoff with his relationship with Kate. Like, that's such a great dynamic. And Dunnett didn't let that, like, she didn't let that fall by the wayside up until now. So I don't think it's just going to vanish like that.
Yeah. How do you think it's going to go between Lymond and Kate now?
I mean, yikes.
Hey, I married your daughter. Hi. Good to see you.
Really, I mean, it's not that, I don't think Kate actually saw Lymond as a realistic choice for herself. Like, I don't necessarily think that I think that she is attracted to him and likes him and has a very special regard for him. But I also don't think that she legitimately thinks this guy's going to marry me and stay in my Lost Valley home. Like, I don't think that was in her thought process. So I think it's going to be complicated.
I would give you my soul in a blackberry pie and the knife to cut it with. That's not just like.
No. I'm not saying that she doesn't care for him and is attracted to him and maybe love him. I just don't think she legitimately, like, it's also, she didn't say it to him, like, because.
No, I agree. I don't think she has any expectations, but I think her emotions run very, very deep.
Oh, yeah. I 100% agree. And I think it's going to be super complicated because she deeply loves her daughter. And I think she's going to understand why this happened. I don't think she's going to be mad that he made that choice to protect Philippa. So, yeah, it's complicated.
So the end of this chapter, the last line is about Kuzum. Kuzum liked the boat. What did you guys think? Like, why is that there? What does that mean?
So let's back up a little bit too, because there's a line about Karenin right before that, which I think applies. So it says, it did not occur to her to give him any spurious parting embrace any more than she had expected to receive one at her wedding, that he himself had bestowed one on Karenin. So an embrace. It was perhaps the most disturbing of all things she had seen him do. Kazum liked the boat. That was a real whiplash comment for me. I just went, what? So yeah, that's my response. I have a question mark and like whiplash.
I don't know. It's sort of the last bit of Philippa we get in this book. She may be mentioned in the next chapter, but like, she's gone on her own way home, and now Kazum is with her. Like, he's going to be a part of her life going forward. So I think that, you know, he's just reiterating the fact that he's traveling with her now, and he's off on his grand adventure back to England. I keep saying Scotland. I don't know. That's what it meant to me.
Well, I want to go back to this embrace that he gave Karenin, that she's like that was the most disturbing thing. So here's my guess, and I'll confess why it's a guess and not a knowledge, is because I didn't actually read the scene after Karenin dies very closely because I just was not in a good place, and I don't want to go back and read it again.
Sure.
So did Lymond, is the embrace that Philippa's talking about, like, did he go and embrace Karenin's dead body? Like, is that what she's talking about? Because I assume that's what it is. Okay, yeah. So she was disturbed by the fact that which it also seems like a deeply grieving thing to do, to pick up the body of this kid that died, and you know. So then we jump from that, which is this hugely emotional, grieving moment that she's recalling. And then she looks at this little boy that's with her, and he's like, he's enjoying the boat. It's just sad,
Yeah, I don't know exactly what Dunnett was doing, but I think it's really, really interesting. And like tonally, it's almost like poetry in the, like you have this imagery of the your sort of last image of the book of the dead child and then the image of the living child. You also have the dead child yet again associated with Lymond and the living child associated with Philippa going off with her. And I feel like there's also this sort of hint of part of why it's so disturbing is because Philippa, it's disturbing to her specifically because she's starting to think the dead child was Lymond's and this child isn't, but like she doesn't really want to go there, but it's like in her subconscious making her disturbed.
Yeah, and there's also an element too, I think, of this, like the boat, like he's a little kid, he's a toddler still, and he's a toddler, and it's, of course he's oblivious to most of what has happened. Like he's probably stressed out about things and is scared about stuff, but mostly oblivious. And he's a little kid and he's on a boat, and so it's like we get this juxtaposition of this child who died and is being grieved deeply by the adults in the story, and then we also have this other kid who's kind of oblivious to everything that's happened. And that side-by-side imagery is, like you said, it's really poetic.
Yeah, and I think you've hit on something with that, is Kazum, he is still a toddler. I don't think he's going to carry any of the events that just happened with him, except maybe the small memory of being beaten by Gabriel or Gabriel's men even. Because, his life up to this point hasn't been horrible like Kareddin's was. He had it pretty easy comparatively. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and I mean, all the images of terror are probably gonna be with, he's scared a lot in all of this, so that's probably not going to go away immediately, but in comparison.
Yeah, I mean, maybe also in some degree it is sort of an indication that even though he's had a fair amount of trauma, he's gonna get through it. Like he's back to enjoying the boat. And it's also the image of him like sailing away from Lymond and just followed immediately after the image of Lymond being close to the other child. So again, this child's going to be okay, but this child is not staying with Lymond. It doesn't have that connection with Lymond that Kareddin had. Any other thoughts on this chapter?
No. So chapter 29, Volos. So in Volos, which is on the coast of Italy, I think, or Greece. It's in the map in the beginning. I'll go back and look at it then. But when they get to Volos, this is Lymond, Marta, and Jarrett. They find an almshouse where Lymond can recuperate and go through withdrawal. But the men that were going to take care of him there, the holy men, quickly realize that there's nothing that they can do to help him, probably because Lymond is being a rat bastard to them in his own special way. So Jarrett and Martha decide to stay and take care of Lymond. There is a lot of dealing with Lymond's withdrawal, and he doesn't want their help. This is almost like the scene in Flaw Valleys where he was recuperating when he shut and locked the door because he didn't want any help from Gideon and Kate. Eventually, Jarrett does get let into the room, and he decides to tell Lymond that Marta is his sister. Lymond says, if Marta told you that, she's lying. She doesn't know the truth. So he's not ready to admit that yet. We see a lot of Lymond reciting poems in different languages and in English that he learned when he was a kid. Marta takes some turns trying to help Lymond, and at the end of one of them, she's so distraught that her and Jarrett have this embrace together. Eventually, Lymond does admit that Marta is his sister, and there's this period of the recuperation where they're sort of spending time with each other, reciting the same poems, reciting the same stories, which totally makes me think that they were absolutely raised or under the influence of the same person when they were growing up. We can discuss that more in depth. Eventually, Marta tells Lymond that the Dame de Dutance is dead. And that's why she said in the beginning that they'd never meet again. Lymond also learns that all of Gautier's money went to the Dame de Dutance, and now that the Dame de Dutance is dead, she left all her money to Lymond. So he spent all of his money on this trip trying to find the children, and now he suddenly has money again. In the middle of the night, one night, after Lymond is recuperated enough that he thinks he leaves secretly so that Jarrett and Martha do not know. And he sort of makes it as far as he can and rests under a tree. And this carriage pulls up and Guzelle comes out. And then Guzelle and Lymond end the book traveling together to parts unknown.
Yep.
So real quick, I have just rapidly Googled Volos, and guys, let's go here when the world opens again. It looks beautiful. It's a Greek island.
Okay.
Lovely.
Oh, I love that picture of the cliffs.
Oh,
my God. Let's go there. Anyway, sorry.
All right, it's our next trip.
If you ever recover from opium addiction, that's the place to go.
Note to self.
So I didn't interpret it as as Lymond and Marta having been raised by the same person.
I didn't either.
I took it as like, you know, those stories of like twins separated at birth, but then it turns out like they both have the same favorite author or something. It's like those things of coincidentally, they're so similar that they came through different route to the same love of poetry in this case.
Sure.
I also took it as just a sign of they're both equally brilliant in the same way. And the canon of like literature that they're working with is not huge. I mean, it's large, but it's not like infinitely large. And so someone who's well educated and loves poetry is going to have a very similar amount of knowledge to some, and is easy. Who finds poetry easy to memorize is going to have a similar section of knowledge to someone else who loves poetry and finds it easy to memorize. So
yeah, it makes sense
that way. I guess I just sort of had this romanticized idea that the two of them were actually raised at the same time and neither of them remember.
No, I don't think so. And there's also like what makes an educated person is kind of codified in a sense. And so like the things that you have to know to be educated. So somebody's educating Marta in a similar way to Lymond, but I don't think it has to be the same person. It's just they're giving her kind of a boy's education. Which,
Philippe, when you thought it may be the same person, like who do you think it is? How do they do that? And did they actually know each other and forget? Or
I don't know. It could be whoever Marta's father is, who might be Lymond's father. There's still a lot of questions about parentage that we will discuss. It could be the Dame de Dutance. I think she's part of the family at this point. I really do. Especially since she ended up leaving all of her money to Lymond at the end. That's weird. So I think that she's, if not necessarily part of his family, like a lot more embroiled in the family affairs than we thought before. So
yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think I don't know if she's part of the family, although I think that's interesting. It's an interesting comment. But I definitely think she's somehow woven into this whole thing in ways we just don't know yet. And clearly, I also find it super interesting that she leaves her entire fortune to Lymond and not Marta at all. She doesn't split it between them.
Well, yeah, and Lymond tries to give it to Marta, and she's like, "No, I'm like even beyond the grave, she'll get her vengeance on me if I take it."
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
How does Marta know that she died that night?
It's a good question. She sort of just feels it. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
It's another bit of our like, there's something a little woo-woo about some of this story.
And do we trust that the Dame de Dutance is actually dead? because all we have to go on it is a feeling that Marta had right now. So I don't know. I don't see why she would just come up with that and tell Lymond, but.
And the fact that she said she'd never see him again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another, I don't know.
So just jumping back a bit, going in order, I think that Lymond's reaction to Marta in this is interesting because she keeps trying to help him. And at first he says that he thinks she's there for revenge. Like she wants to see him suffer and make it worse. And she says, I'm not here to mock. And it's like, it's been pretty obvious to us for a while that she's been helping a lot and she's not there to hurt him. But because he has these blinders on about her and he just can't like even allow himself to like deal with her existence, his blinders have prevented him from seeing her transformation and her goodness and how helpful she's been. And it's not until the poetry that he finally gets it. And Philippe, you kind of skipped over when Jarrett says she's your sister and Lymond denies it and says she's lying. He also says if she comes in here again, I shall kill her.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like super overreaction. He just cannot.
Well, I think I skipped that because I didn't really believe that he meant that. I think it's just Lymond being Lymond. I don't know.
Yeah, I did love the thing that he said at the bottom of 593 where she says like Jared and I will do what we can for you, and he says his voice was cynical and almost as steady as hers. The origin of pain, says Buddha, is the thirst for pleasure, the thirst for existence, the thirst for change. Destroy your passions as an elephant throws down a hut filled of reeds. The only remedy for evil is healthy reality. You are my healthy reality. I'm indebted to you. But as I've already told the hospital brethren, I need no further attention. And I thought that was interesting. Like, she's his healthy reality. Like, is it like he's depending on her to, or he trusts that she's going to be blunt and tell him the truth and not sugarcoat anything, which is true. But at this point, he hasn't accepted her yet. So,
well, and she tells him it's a time for logic, not vanity, and he says, "And a time, I suppose, for revenge," which is very Lymond. Like he has obviously been in positions of great suffering where no one has helped him, and people have only hurt him worse. And so he just doesn't like. He can't process like these people just are genuinely trying to help you. They're really not trying to hurt you. Even Marta, who certainly didn't like you before, she's not here for vengeance. She really genuinely isn't. But like he's got a complex.
Yeah. But I do like her sense of like, we're just going to deal with this in a very practical sense. Like she's very practical. She's very, and she's, I mean, like Philippe, we've talked about Philippe being practical too, but Marta is practical in a sort of blunt, harsh way, but not a bad way. Like it's just like, this is the way it is, and we're going to deal with it. Yeah.
But I think Philippe did a great job drawing that parallel with the scene in Game of Kings when he shuts the door on Kate. It's just like when he's injured, he hides in his shell.
Yeah. I do love Jarrett's comment where he says, look, if you're having pain, scream. If you're seeing 1,000-pound elephant birds with reinforced iron nests, tell us and we shall believe you. And it's just like, whatever you're going through, don't do it alone. And it was good. Like if you want to climb up and jump from the roof, let me tell you that we feel exactly the same, just don't lock us out. And
which again goes back to that scene in the beginning where Lymond asked Jarrett not to let him drive him away. And here Jarrett, with Lymond doing everything he can to try and drive him away and saying like, no, I'm staying.
Yeah.
And it really gets to me this moment where Lymond is suffering and Marta goes up there and presses her cheek against the wall and listens. Like,
yeah,
really does care.
Yeah, it's just this image of like she's there for him, but she doesn't want him to know, and yet she's still like sitting there with him in the midst of this pain.
And then when she goes in the room and starts reciting the poetry with him, He doesn't see her eyes fill up, sparkling with tears.
Yeah.
He really does care.
Yeah. Yeah. And this bit about like, so at the bottom of 596. So Jarrett stood half an hour of it, then left suddenly, his face white, walking straight through the common room and out into the faint golden sunshine where he sat, his hands over his ears. So Jarrett can't take it anymore. Like he's not abandoned Lymond, but he's left this suffering. He can't sit there through the suffering. Marta stayed. She stayed until the voice, now roughened and slow, found trouble at last in sustaining that uneven flow of beauty and other men's wisdom, and stumbled, spinning the fabric of poetry too thinly to conceal what was lying beneath. Then she opened the door and went into him. And so it's like she stays there beside him for as long as he's keeping it even somewhat together. She just stays outside and doesn't go in and doesn't go in and doesn't go in until finally he's stumbling as this coping mechanism isn't working, and that's when she goes in, which yeah,
This is also the most poetic way to describe, an opiate withdrawal that you will ever read.
yeah. Like you can just feel that she does feel this connection to her brother, that she has come to the point where his opinion of her and his connection to her aside, like she has a connection to him. And
and that moment where he's staring at her, he looks like a man crossing a chasm on a fine skein of silk, who has seen its strands fray and now watches an enemy untie the whole. So he thinks she's there to destroy him, basically, and instead, she like starts weaving a replacement to take him to the other side. And the way that she does it in that very unsentimental Marta way of not paying him any attention, but sitting down and reciting until he starts picking up on it and going along with her.
Yeah. I mean, like you said about the poetic, like this is the most poetic opiate withdrawal you'll ever see. But yeah, this sometimes when the attack was at its height, he broke off, the breath dead in his throat, and crouched gasping with pain by the bed until girder by girder he built up his courage again, and rising, wrapped the voice of his torment once more in the words Marta brought him. It's like, oh.
The way that at the end he reconciles with her, and he does it through their shared language of poetry, where he starts this poem that begins, "I have a young sister far beyond the sea."
Yeah.
That's his final acknowledgement that, you are my sister.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful.
So then what do you guys make of her little speech? She says, "I am not here to mock. I have worn out my revenge. You have guided me into a world which has been closed to me all my life. You have shown me that what I hold by, you hold by and more. You have shown me strength I do not possess, and humanity I thought belonged only to women. You're a man and have explained all men to me."
I mean, I think it goes back to that, what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago about her longing for connection and identity, and that she is like that connection to Lymond is there. And it's not about money, it's not about you shared your fortune with me, it's about you showed me this thing that I didn't understand, this world that's been closed to me, and that that we have a connection. What I hold by, you hold by, and that is who she is and who he is. And yeah.
And I think it goes back to how she thought that the treasure was the key to being a full human being. But here she's given up the treasure in favor of saving the people, and that is direct result of the experience she's had, realizing that the treasure wasn't actually the way to get what she was missing. That what was missing was this human connection.
Yeah.
That said, that you have explained all men to me. He's a pretty unique man. I think most men are not as often as so it's kind of a weird line.
I was like, huh? Also, maybe like she doesn't like men very much, understandably so. And so now there's one that's kind of redeemed. And so maybe that's where she's going with this. But yeah.
I mean, it's easy not to like men very much when your only family is Gautier.
Yeah. But yeah, the thought of Frances being her like defining person for all men, I'm like, I'm not sure that's the best way to go about it. But I do love that the next thing she says is Frances. It's like,
We have that exchange about it later too, about how she's now in that circle of 5 people that can call him by his first name.
yeah.
And speaking of the all men thing, she's apparently decided she's okay with Jarrett now because she runs into his arms and weeps in them.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen there?
Oh, I don't know.
I think they won't have as many. I don't know the right way to put this. I don't think they'll fight as much in the next book or two if they're both in the next book or two, which they will be. But
I don't know. I think they're still going to fight a lot. Like, I feel like Jared and Marta are an interesting pair because I think they could be good for each other, maybe. But I also think they're kind of like flint and stone. Like, I think they're gonna spark, and it's not. I don't think that's going away. So I think Marta, like this whole realization that Marta has had is great, and I'm really excited for her character development. And I think she's super interesting. I also think she's still really harsh. I don't think that part of her personality is going to change. So I think she's still probably going to say stuff to Jarrett that's like, even if they get together, I think she's still going to say stuff to him that's like super painful, and she's not going to let him off the hook for stuff. And I don't know.
He's still Jarrett.
He's still Jarrett. He's still going to make really dumb choices and do really stupid things, and she's not going to have a lot of patience for that. So yeah, so we'll see. I kind of like them together, so
I do.
Yeah,
I think maybe Marta will help Jarrett with his obsession with Lymond, get over that a little bit.
Maybe he'll just transfer, like, because Jarrett has to be obsessed with someone. So
well, it's interesting. I was going to wait till we finish this chapter to talk about it, but I did go back and read the part with the Dame de Dutantes where she does sort of all of the prophecies or her ideas of what's going to happen in this book. And there's an interesting line with Jarrett that we talked about back then about how he's never going to fall in love again. And I'm like, I don't know. So
that is weird.
What's the line? Which one of them says it?
It's Jarrett that says it. I have to go back to the page because I was going to talk about this later.
Again? Or the Dame de Dutantes says he's never going to.
No, it's Jarrett. I just read this again before we started.
He's not. He doesn't know.
Exactly.
He's just an idiot who makes these grand proclamations about what he thinks and what he feels, and then like half a second later it changes.
Then you must put on record that once I loved a girl and wished to make her my wife, and once I loved a man and wished to make him my leader, I shall never do either again.
Oh yeah, that there's no, like, that's just dismiss that out of hand. Like, no way.
The Dom says, these are words I have waited to hear. You are adequate to your fate, Mr. Blythe. You need no help from me to find it.
Yeah, he absolutely wants Lymond to be his leader, and he absolutely is falling in love with both Lymond and Marta. And yeah, no, that's just Jared making grand pronouncements.
Also, this is like the best pronouncement for a fortune teller ever. You are adequate to your fate.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that he's right. It just means,
Yeah.
it's going to happen, and you'll live up to it.
Yeah.
So there is an exchange shortly after this where Marta and Lymond talk a little bit. They talk a little bit around what they're really talking about, but it's apparent in the subtext. He says, "Are you sure it is my name you should bear?" Meaning, are you sure that my father and your father are the same person and it's not, like, say, my mother? And there's this waiting moment, like before she answers, where a clock is ticking, and a nerve flicked like a thread at the side of his mouth and was gone. So, like, as much as he's playing it cool, like, this is like the moment of truth that he's waiting for the answer about his mother. And then Marta says she doesn't know. But I feel like that kind of gives you an idea of why he wouldn't acknowledge it for so long and why he's still so afraid to talk about it.
Right. I mean, if his father had a bastard daughter, I don't see him caring. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, if Gavin, whatever, that's fine. If Sibylla did, that's a huge, huge, huge issue that reflects on his mother today. Like,
or if it wasn't Sibylla and she's not his mother, that's equally devastating.
Yes, also devastating. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's huge. So, yeah, it's all about his mother. And, like, how does this impact his relationship with his mother? And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, the reason he's refused to acknowledge Marta this entire time is because he's afraid that something's going to happen to his relationship with his mother.
Let's not forget that the first book ended with him hugging his mom.
Yeah. Which makes me think it's definitely connected to his mother. Like, whatever the secret is, and I honestly don't think we're even going to find out in the next book. I think this secret is the in-game secret. I think this is what the final book is going to be about, because it's so close to Lymond's identity and heart. And I just really think this is going to be like the thing that we're going to be waiting to find out till the end. But it has to be about Sibylla, like, for sure. At least the core of it has to be something about her and her relationship to Lymond, and her relationship, like, in her honor, and how she, I don't know, follows her own conscience, and how that reflects stuff. But yeah, I think it's got to be all about Sibylla, and Gavin will just be incidental to the whole thing in some ways. I mean, obviously he's a big deal because he's legally her husband, but I don't know. I feel like it's all about her.
So we also have, kind of going back to the prophecies, Philippe, that you went back and read. We have Marta's summary of what the Debutante was doing there. She had breathed life into her puppets, you and I to discover what in ourselves we still lacked, Philippa to be gilded as befitted her spirit, Jarrett to be taken from you, and my lover and I to be parted. There's a whole lot going on there.
Yeah.
First of all, Philippa to be gilded as befitted her spirit tells me that where the mission that she sent Philippa on had absolutely nothing to do with Lymond's child. It was about Philippa. Mm-hmm. And my lover and I to be parted. Who's her lover?
Yeah, what was that? I'm completely confused.
Yeah, do we not know something about her that was happening before she left on this trip?
Is it implying that she was with Gautier? Because gross.
I hope that's not possible.
No.
Not the way she sort of felt toward him.
Ugh.
Did it have to be a man?
No.
But have we seen her with anyone? Wait a second.
been antagonistic towards Gazelle.
Is she with Gazelle? Yaya Katu? Is that? Oh, maybe that's why they were so mad. Huh.
Could be.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Maybe go back and read their scenes together.
Okay. Boy, did I not pick up on that at all.
Nope, me neither.
Oh man, that is interesting. Huh. Okay. I like it. Interesting.
It explains part of why she was so jealous of Lymond.
Right. Yeah. And the clear emotional subtext going on when they were captured by, yeah, I forget the name of the place where they were at with the tournament and everything, but
Is that Aleppo?
I can't remember. But there was so much like undercurrent of emotion in the conversations that she had, that the two of them had together, that I just was like, why is this such a big deal?
And her scene with Jai Hatun where she's like, is there nothing left for me?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Boy, did that go over my head.
Oh, Dorothy.
Interesting. Huh.
She also said Garrett will have kindness.
Yeah. Which, yay, if that's true. Although I feel like, knowing Dorothy Dunnett, it's going to be kindness before ultimate tragedy, or ultimate tragedy and then some kindness that doesn't make up for the ultimate tragedy. But yeah.
And so then we also have this question of what Lymond's going to do next, and he says, earn my living and that of my independence.
Mm-hmm.
We find out about the inheritance, but I think the earn my living gives us a hint of what he's doing at the very end.
I mean, we shall see. I don't know.
Yeah, he's gonna go get a job. I don't know.
He flat out tells us, I'm going to go earn my living. Yeah.
Wait, what?
He flat out tells us, I'm going to go earn my living. And
Yeah. I mean, I hope he's not, because he's been so resistant for books of being someone's tool, you know, and giving up his freedom and all of that to be someone's instrument in some way. And so if he's given up on that and is just resigned to being used by people, like, that makes me really sad. But it may be where he's just, that's the emotional place that he's in right now. So I don't know.
who are the 5 people, in addition to Marta, there'd be 4 more, who can call Lymond by his first name?
Garrett, Sibylla, Richard.
Kate, does she call him Francis? And Marta.
Well, Marta was 5, yeah.
Yeah.
And Gabriel, I think, called him Francis once or twice, unfortunately. But
He doesn't count.
no.
And he's dead, so yeah. Kate was my question mark. I couldn't remember if she had done it, if she called him Francis, but she has, right?
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Oh God, how cool it's gonna be when Philippa finally calls him Francis.
Mm.
Can you imagine? She's gonna call him Mr. Crawford forever.
I don't know about forever.
Or just nothing. Like, she just won't give him, she'll just talk to his face but not address him. Yeah.
So then we get the question of when he's going back to Scotland, and he says never.
That's not true.
It's got to go back, at least for the end.
He's going back. Yeah. He's definitely going back.
So Philippe, you kind of said it like he rides off and like falls off the horse, but he has an appointment. It says here but he actually makes it to a specific place and time that has been prearranged,
Sure.
and he has an appointment. So how and when was this arranged?
That was my question, because he also has some money. So like, how does he get some money and arrange an appointment?
Well, the money could be that last little bit of coin that he had that the guy threw down.
Oh, okay.
He can still have that money, but how does he have an appointment?
Unless he's had it preset for a while now.
But how?
I don't know.
Also, they're really far away from Constantinople at this point. So they're in Greece. And yeah.
I mean, he could have left word with McCall when McCall left.
Oh, yeah.
He's working for Guzell.
Or frankly, Guzell could have left word with him about where to be and when.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I forgot about McCall. Yeah, it's got to be McCall, right? He's got to be the go-between.
So, but going back then, like when and in what context was this appointment arranged?
Well, McCall leaves them in the... So from Kiaya's point of view, it's the last time she sees them is the end of the chess match, right? She doesn't see them after that. So she would have to assume that he makes it out alive, which is not an unreasonable assumption to make, knowing Lymond, that somehow he's going to get away. And with McCall information, I don't know.
Go back further to the confrontation with Gabriel, where Michal turns out to be on Lymond's side.
Mm-hmm.
And Zell and Michal help provide the information that is the turning point against Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
That was prearranged with Lymond. He knew that was going to happen. Michal's betrayal was prearranged. He was surprised by his coming back, but he wasn't surprised by the betrayal. That was part of the plan. To make Gabriel trust Michal and then have Michal betray Gabriel. That whole sequence in front of Roxolana was prearranged with Guzell via Michal.
Mm-hmm.
What did she get out of that deal?
I really, really, really don't want the answer to this just to be that Lymond's going to sell himself to Guzell. Like that, please let that not be the answer to this problem, because first of all, I want her to be better than that. Second of all, he's gone through so much trauma. Can he please not be doing like, can there be something else happening here? So,
well, I don't know that it means he's selling himself to her sexually. She's a woman who gets her power through powerful men because of the world she lives in. So the question is more like, of the powerful men, there's Dragut, who she's with. There's Gabriel, who she played with and then decided he was a dick.
Mm-hmm.
There's Lymond. So if Dragut's not working out anymore and she needs an alternative, she's got Gabriel, but she doesn't want to be involved with him. Here's Lymond.
Yeah.
Pretty tough.
Yeah. Interesting. And it is true. Like Dragut never showed up in this whole book, which...
Where is he?
That is weird. Army? Where is he? Yeah. Huh. Who knows?
I mean, historically, he was probably doing something, so she couldn't really have brought him into it. So.
He's a person. That's right. I forgot about that. So there's a part of me that's kind of like, I don't think we can figure that out yet. Like, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what her plans are. And that's obviously the next book. So, but clearly she thinks she can use Lymond for something. So what is it that she's going to use him for? And why does she acquiesce to it? And interestingly, if what you're saying is that this is the reward that she gets for helping him through this super complicated plan, then whatever she wants from him has got to be a really big deal, because it's, you know, enough to convince her to do all this kind of risky stuff. So,
She's a
We
risk.
shall see.
what could it be?
I mean, I guess I don't think it's a spoiler to say, like, when I read this, I assumed that this was just part of their arrangement that we saw kind of happening throughout that whole confrontation, that this was just a continuation of the stuff that they had agreed to, because there's no other way that he'd have a pre-arranged appointment at a particular place and time. Like, they clearly planned this out and agreed on it way ahead of time. I also just enjoy his somewhere a vestige of flamboyance, which led him to slap his horse on the rump, and he gives this quote, which is like, oh, just a little tiny bit of our Lymond still in there.
Yeah. Also, the fact that like both people show up at the appointment at the right time is kind of miraculous. Like, how did that happen? I mean, I'm late when I want to go, you know, into Manhattan on the subway for something. You know, it's like we're gonna, in the 16th century, we're gonna take a boat across the Mediterranean, but we're gonna make it on time to the appointment by the side of the road.
Well, I think, I mean, I assume he thought he'd be dead and would not be keeping his appointment, but since he's alive, he's like, oh, I guess I'll keep it.
Might as well.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll lead to something fun. Who knows?
Nothing better to do. I'm gonna earn my keep.
Or protect my wife and her kid, you know, which granted he doesn't need to do anymore because now he has money again, maybe. But your point about like, maybe he's not completely confident that that money is going to actually materialize. So yeah.
So, overall thoughts on this book and on what's going to happen next?
This was a whirlwind. This was a roller coaster ride, this one. I don't know if I like this one more or less than 3, but they've both almost been their own self-contained story within the larger series of the Lymond Chronicles, you know?
I definitely like 3 better. Is
Yeah.
of the 4, I think this is my least favorite, but I think it's just because I feel super betrayed still by the story. Like, it's just, yeah. I just think that, like, I understand the value of having something this horrific for a character to go through in terms of what it does for the character and the story elements that this will open up later. But as a reader, I don't find that value to be worth it. Like, I kind of don't care about, like, it's sort of like, it's almost, I almost feel like I don't care how interesting this makes Lymond or how interesting this makes the rest of the story. The fact that I still feel super betrayed by the author in this way makes me not like this book. And like, the odds of me rereading this book are pretty small at this point, just because I know that everything's leading up to the death of Corydon, and I'm like, I just don't want to go there again. So we'll see. But
I love this one. I think it's really beautifully written, and I love the atmosphere, and I love the poetry, and I love the imagery, and I just like, and I love the, like, all the different places and the different, like, scents and food and these, like, melancholy emotions that kind of swirl through everything, and these weird, complicated, super subtextual psychosexual dynamics between, like, Jarrett and Marta and Lymond and Grizel, and like Philippe's awakening and her transformation. Like, I just super love this book, even though there's a certain chapter I don't want to reread. That is very
yeah.
Sure.
You're 100% right. I think I agree with you 100% about all those things. I think it's beautifully written. I think it's incredibly complicated in really interesting ways. But for right now, it's just deeply colored by the death of Corydon, and I don't want to experience that again. Now, in 5 years from now, maybe I'll be fine just to read it and skip that chapter. Like, I can totally see that happening. But yeah, I think like this was maybe the best written of the 4 that we've read so far in terms of the imagery and all of that, and its beauty and complexity and all of that. But yeah, I just don't like it. So
You have the right to your opinion.
yeah.
It certainly shows that she had an emotional impact.
Yeah, like I think you're absolutely right that this is like my response to this book is solely because of how good a writer she is, and that she evoked a response from me as a reader that has not happened to me a lot as a reader. And I've read a lot of books, you know, and so kudos to her as an author. Like she did a fantastic job. But
I really can't believe she went there in the 60s with like, you know, child sexual slavery and murder. Like, wow, you know, it's a really dark book.
yeah, it's super dark. Yeah. And I think she just was so successful that I don't want to reread the book. Like it was like she was so good at what she did in this book, but I'm like, yeah, I can't ever do that again. So
okay, you don't have to.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. Maybe someday.
I have different subject, an observation that I had while reading this book, and a question then after that. So the observation is either I had a revelation or it's totally something we already talked about and I just completely forgot. But I went back, like I said, to read the Dame de Dutan's chapter to see about, you know, how the prophecies came forward. And as I was making notes for it and realizing that in my shorthand, I just write letters instead of names, I was writing DD for Dame de Dutan's. And then I was writing DD for Dorothy Dunnett. And it hit me. Is the Dame de Dutan's actually sort of like a foil for Dorothy Dunnett? Did she write herself into the books?
Oh, that's interesting.
I totally think so, because she's the author.
Herself in all his movies.
Yeah, like she knows what's going to happen to the characters. She's basically fate for these books. And like that's sort of the character that the Dame de Dutan's brings about as well. I just think I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm not gonna, I mean, I don't think it's answerable, but there's speculation out there in the fandom about the same thing. So I'm
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah. I was like, DD. Oh, hi. So then my question was, the Dame de Dutan said that Lymond has 3 bitter lessons to learn. Not necessarily saying he's learned any of them or all of them in this book, but if he did learn a bitter lesson in this book, what do you think it might be?
What were the 3 that we have to choose from?
She never says what the lessons are. She just says you have 3 bitter lessons to learn. It could be anything that happens in this book.
She did say something, didn't she?
Who?
I thought she did say something about it's a thing, and a thing.
Evil matters, so does love, so does pity.
Yeah.
Evil, love, and pity.
Oh, so she actually does quantify them. Oh, well.
Yeah. So it could be that evil matters, like the death of Una is that lesson. The death of Peredin could be love or pity. I mean, if all the lessons are contained within this book, marrying Philippa could be pity.
I don't know. I thought that maybe not going with those 3 things, because I didn't realize that the 3 lessons were based on those. I thought that one of the things he learned definitely was acceptance, and that how he sort of treats Marta throughout the whole book. And then he comes to this realization right at the end where he's sort of more open to embracing their familial connection and opening up to the fact that, oh, this is a person I can rely on. This is not only a friend, but a sister now. So, Because I think he was very bitter about it throughout the entire book until he finally just lets it be.
I could be with both Marta and Kyreden that he learns familial love in a way that's like beyond his mother and his brother.
Mm-hmm.
I think definitely with Kyreden, like the moment that Jarrett like sees his face and has this image of him as like he's been hungering for something and he didn't know what it was until he saw this child, is like this depth of love in a parental way that he didn't know he was capable of. I think that is one of the lessons. I always sort of assume that pity I think is used here in the sense more of like compassion, and that he feels that for both children, but particularly Kyreden. And evil, I assume Gabriel, we kind of knew that already, but we extra learned it in this book.
I don't know. I hope there's nobody as evil as Gabriel coming up, because we had our competent villain and no more.
We've had it. It was enough.
Yep.
Yeah. Or at
Moving
least,
on.
like, I don't mind an evil villain or a competent villain. I just would prefer not to have a sadistic villain. Like, let's just, someone's like all about political power or something. Fine, we'll fight that. But
I would say there's still part of love that he hasn't learned, because remember back in Queen's Flame, he was like, I'm never going to get married. Well, now he's gotten married, but he's still never really experienced romantic love. I still would argue he started to feel it with Christian, and then when she died, he just like cut that side of himself off and was like, nope.
yeah, I agree with that.
Mhm.
He still doesn't. He's still holding back from allowing himself to feel like that kind of love. And I think after this experience with Kyreden, like he's just gonna shut down everything, because he was so vulnerable, like loving this little kid made him so vulnerable and broken. And so
Yeah, so I was going to ask you what is going to happen next.
they're gonna go to a castle that has some rings on it. I don't know.
Lymond and Gazelle will travel somewhere. Do something.
To do some things.
I definitely think we're gonna get a lot of Philippa without Lymond around, like from her point of view. Like I wouldn't be surprised if the next book is sort of a split narrative of wherever Lymond is and what's happening with him, and then what's happening to Philippa now that she's back home. At least that's what I hope.
Archie sticks around,
Yeah.
with Philippa. That would be great. Really like Archie. I'm so glad he didn't die. I was definitely assuming that Archie was going to die in this book. So, yeah.
Is Lymond going to link back up with St. Mary's squad? Maybe.
I think so. Otherwise,
I mean, he said he'd take care of that as soon as he was done with Gabriel, and he's done with Gabriel now. So,
yeah, I think he's got to go back to St. Mary's at some point, because otherwise it's just this thread that's hanging out there.
Yeah.
So something's got to happen there. And he has money again, maybe. Although he's giving it all to Philippa and
I think we're slowly going to start to return to some of the things that we saw in the first two books. Like Mary Queen of Scots is going to be part of the story again. Margaret Lennox is going to be part of the story again. Sibylla and Richard will come back, hopefully in a big way, because Lymond and Richard are going to meet again. That whole your father's two sons will never meet again. That's because they don't have the same damn father. That's all that is.
Yeah, I agree. There's got to be some random. Is that what the line was? Your father's two sons will not meet again. That's the line. So there's got to be some guy out there that's like Lymond's father's son that isn't Richard. That
didn't say you won't ever see Richard again.
Right. And there's got to be, if she said again, that means there's a brother that we don't know about. Is that?
again would imply that he's met him before at some point.
Right, he's met him before and he'll never meet him again. So there's a brother / half brother out there that we don't know about, which could be someone other than Gavin's son.
Or it could just be somebody who's dead because they'll never meet again. We don't know.
Yeah, a dead person that Lymond has met before. So if we go on the assumption that Lymond is Sibylla's son with someone else, which I think is a reasonable assumption to make at this point.
I hope so.
Then that someone else also has a son that has died.
Or is still around.
Still around, but we'll never meet Lymond again. But died.
Yeah.
Maybe. So he's got a dead half brother, maybe. That's not Richard.
No.
And
I will be furious if Richard and Lymond never have a scene together again.
Wait, that's not gonna happen. I refuse to accept that. They've got it.
What do you want to happen if they reunite?
Richard and Lymond? Oh, I just want them to be brothers. Have some good scenes with Kevin.
Oh, Kevin and Kazukoyam are cousins now. What is it with the K names?
Yeah. Lots of K's. I don't know. Yeah, I just want Richard and Lymond to be like supportive and do things together. For Richard not to make massive assumptions about things, which
well, that's probably going to happen. But
I know. I feel like that's probably not possible, but oh well.
Where are Lymond and Giselle going? Where's our
Who the hell knows?
we'll find out real soon.
A castle that has some rings around it, clearly.
Do you have anywhere you want them to go, or you just like, oh, okay?
I would like to see. We have talked about the Pope and sort of the Emperor of sort of like, with sort of being the Italy faction. I don't think Italy is the place they're going to go because they've already been in Italy. But I would love to see like Spain come into play. Like that's a possibility, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to get out of the Mediterranean and back to Europe. So maybe even like Eastern Europe might be interesting. We haven't done that. What's going on in, like, I don't even know what the countries are called at this point. Like Poland and Latvia's, and like, I don't even know what any of that is. Russia. Obviously, Russia's a country. But I don't know about the rest of them.
Yeah.
What's going to happen if Lymond and Sibylla reunite?
There's going to be some interesting conversations.
Yeah.
Lymond's going to be like, I have a sister, by the way. What's that all about, Mom?
Or Sibylla and Marta having a conversation. That would be interesting.
Kitty. She waited quite a long time this time.
I know. You got to participate.
I think she must know that we're wrapping up.
I have opinions about Sibylla. Anything you guys want? Like, I guess in the rest of the series, like, what do you want?
A happy ending.
I mean, I want more. So I know the action stuff is great. Like, it's fun. We run around and do capers, and that's great and fun. But I really want lots of conversations among characters. Like, I want characters to talk to each other. So I really love those scenes where we get to unpick, what characters say and all their conversations. So I want a lot more of that. And I want Philippa and Lymond to talk to each other. I want Marta and Jarrett to talk to each other. I want Jarrett and Lymond to talk to each other. I just want to see the characters. They've had growth, they've had character growth that we've seen over these books, and I was like, that would be part of their growth is that they now communicate about things.
Lymond in particular still needs to learn how to communicate about things.
I
Yeah.
want Lymond to be able to snap out of his coming grumpy puss phase very, very quickly.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, but someone's going to have to slap some sense into him in the next book because he's going to be in a place.
Well, and it's not so much that I think is he needs therapy. Like he needs a lot of therapy. So is there a character that will help him process some of this? And if there's not, then is he just going to stuff it down and ignore it, which I think is probably what's going to happen, and then be broken for and stunted emotionally forever or for a while, you know. So it'd be nice to have some character who does sort of force him to acknowledge his grief and to work through guilt and all of that. Which I don't think he's ever actually done. Like he's never really worked through his trauma at all.
Piled up and piled up. I think Lymond helped him a bit in the second book, but then, you know, more and more piled up.
Oh, Lymond, I forgot about him.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope he comes back at some capacity at some point. Oh, Lymond.
Just his heart is like too pure and good for these books.
Yeah, I'm glad he wasn't a part of the crap that happened in the past two books.
I feel like Archie could be sort of a mentor. Like Archie seems super competent, first of all, but also observant. And I don't know if he has that role in Lymond's life. Like that doesn't seem to be sort of the role that he's taking in Lymond's life, but maybe he could. I don't know.
I always think about that line about Jarrett realizing that Archie's a man in his 50s and Lymond's only 26. Like yeah. Archie is he's in this weird social role of being like a servant, but also a semi-parental figure, like a caretaker.
Yeah, exactly. And he's super loyal to Lymond, and he knows a lot of what's happened. Like Archie is well aware of a lot of Lymond's trauma. So I think this would be a good person to do that. And Lymond respects him and trusts him. Lymond trusts him.
Therapy with Archie.
Therapy with Archie. That's what I want to see. Okay, that's what I want to see. I want to see weekly therapy sessions with Archie going forward. It's not going to happen.
The Abernathy archives.
Yeah.
What about with Philippa? What do you want to happen with her aside from her reintegration into society?
I want her relationship with good. For her to learn how to be a mom, for Kate to be part of that, you know.
Yeah, it's just going to take some time. I think her and Lymond will spend quite a while apart before there's any kind of reunion. Like, I don't expect the next book to like jump in time and have them together suddenly. So.
Yeah, same. I think there's a lot. There's a lot they both need to do personally before they could get together in any way that would be healthy. Like, there's no way she could be with Lymond now. He's just messed up, and she's got to, kind of reintegrate into society. So.
Reintegrate into society with a child.
And absent.
Not only as a married woman, but as a woman married to England's kind of enemy.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on this book or hopes for the future?
I just hope it's another good one. I'm sure it will be.
Looking forward to book 5. See what happens.
Yes, catch us next time in the Ringed Castle.
I'm super glad this is not the end. So
yeah,
I'm glad we have 2 more books.
It's an end to a phase of the story, definitely. Like I said, the last 2 books have felt like their own self-contained story within the Lymond universe. So but we don't have to deal with Gabriel anymore. So Lymond can move on with his life and figure the rest of the shit out.
Yay. I did love Gabriel as a villain. Like,
Yeah,
you guys were right. Like, we
I
needed
mean, it's awful, but
a real challenge for Lymond, and like, yeah, she certainly delivered.
That's the truth. I guess I should be careful what I wish for from now on.
I was thinking that when you guys were wishing it, I was like,
Maybe I don't want that.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching. We appreciate all of your comments.
Yeah. Thank you.